Chapter 17. Steadier on my feet but still feeling faint, I followed Paul as he dubbed up the dusty staircase. Linda Rose was waiting at the top. I recognized her scrolling face from the window. She had long white hair spreading across her shoulders like a spider's web. She was enormously overweight. A swollen neck, fleshy forearms, massive legs like tree trunks. She was leaning heavily on her walking stick, which was buckling under her weight and looked like it might give away at any moment. "Who is he? Who is he?" Her shrill question was directed to Paul, even though she was staring at me. She didn't take her eyes off me. Again, the same intense gaze I recognized from Alicia. Paul spoke in a low voice. "Mom, don't get upset. He's Alicia's therapist, that's all, from the hospital. He's here to talk to me." "You? What does he want to talk to you for? What have you done?" "He just wants to find out a bit about Alicia." "He's a journalist, you fucking idiot." Her voice approached a shriek. "Get him out." "He's not a journalist. I've seen his ID, alright? Now come on, Mom, please. Let's get you back to bed." Grumbling, she allowed herself to be guided back into her bedroom. Paul nodded at me to follow. Linda flopped back with a deep thud. The bed quivered as it absorbed her weight. Paul adjusted her pillows. An ancient cat lay asleep by her feet, the ugliest cat I ever seen. Battle-scarred, bald in places, one ear bitten off, it was growling in its sleep. I glanced around the room. It was full of junk, stacks of old magazines and yellowing newspapers, piles of old clothes, an oxygen canister stood by the wall, and a cake tin full of medications was on the bedside table. I could feel Linda's hostile eyes on me the whole time. There was madness in her gaze. I felt quite sure of that. "What does he want?" Her eyes started up and down furiously as she sized me up. "Who is he?" "I just told you, Mom. He wants to know some background on Alicia to help him treat her. He's her psychotherapist." Linda laughed, no doubt about her opinion of psychotherapist. She turned her head, cleared her throat, and spat on the floor in front of me. Paul groaned. "Mom, please." "Shut up," Linda glared at me. "Alicia doesn't deserve to be in hospital." "No," I said. "Where should she be?" "Where do you think? Prison." Linda eyed me scornfully. "You want to hear about Alicia? I'll tell you about her. She's a little bitch. She always was, even as a child." I listened, my head throbbing as Linda went on with mounting anger. "My poor brother, Vernon. He never recovered from Eva's death. I took care of him. I took care of Alicia. And was she grateful?" Obviously, no response was required. Not that Linda would, for one. "You know how Alicia repaid me? All my kindness. Do you know what she did to me?" "Mom, please." "Shut up, Paul." Linda turned to me. I was surprised how much anger was in her voice. "That bitch painted me. She painted me without my knowledge or permission. I went to her exhibition and there it was, hanging there. Foul, disgusting, and obscene mockery." Linda was trembling with anger, and Paul looked concerned. He gave me an unhappy glance. "Maybe it's better if you go now, mate. It's not good for Mom to get upset." I nodded. Linda Rose was not well, no doubt about that. I was more than happy to escape. I left the house and made my way back to the train station with a swollen head and a splitting headache. What a fucking waste of time. I found out nothing, except it was obvious why Alicia had gotten out of that house as soon as she could. It reminded me of my own escape from home at the age of 18, fleeing my father. It was all too obvious who Alicia was running away from, Linda Rose. I thought about the painting Alicia had done of Linda, an obscene mockery she called it. Well, time to pay a visit to Alicia's gallery and find out why the picture had upset her aunt so much. As I left Cambridge, my last thoughts were of Paul. I felt sorry for him, having to live with that monstrous woman, be her unpaid slave. It was a lonely life. I didn't imagine he had many friends or a girlfriend. I wouldn't be surprised if he was still a virgin. Something about him remained stunted. Despite his size, something thwarted. I had taken an instant and violent dislike to Linda, probably because she reminded me of my father. I would have ended up like Paul if I had stayed in that house, if I had stayed with my parents in Surrey at the beck and call of a madman. I felt depressed all the way to London, sad, tired, close to tears. I couldn't tell if I was feeling Paul's sadness or my own. Chapter 18. Kathy was out when I got home. I opened her laptop and tried to access her email, but with no luck. She was locked out. I had to accept that she might never repeat her mistake. Would I keep checking in nauseam, give in to obsession, driving myself mad? I have enough self-awareness to appreciate the cliche I had become, the jealous husband, and the irony that Kathy was currently rehearsing Desdemonia in Othello hadn't escaped me. I should have forwarded the emails to myself that first night as soon as I read them. Then I'll have some actual physical evidence. That was my mistake, as it was. I've begun questioning what I had seen. Was my recollection to be trusted? I've been stone out of my mind after all. Had I misunderstood what I had read? I found myself coercing outlandish theories to prove Kathy's innocent. Maybe it was just an acting exercise. She was withering in character in preparation for Othello. She had spent 6 weeks speaking in a regional American accent when preparing for All My Sons. It was possible something similar was going on here, except the emails were signed by Kathy, not Desdemonia. If only I had imagined it all, then I could forget it, the way you forget a dream. I could wake up and it would fade away. Instead, I was trapped in this endless nightmare of mistrust, suspicion, paranoia. Although on the surface little had changed, we still went for a walk together on Sunday. We looked like every other couple strolling in the park. Perhaps our silence were longer than usual, but they seemed comfortable enough. Under the silence, however, a fevered, one-sided conversation was taking place in my mind. I rehearsed a million questions. Why did she do it? How could she? Why say she loved me and marry me? Fuck me and share my bed. Then lie to my face and keep lying, year after year. How long had it been going on? Did she love this man? Was she going to leave me for him? I looked through her phone a couple of times when she was in the shower, searching for text messages, but found nothing. If she received any incriminating texts, she had deleted them. She wasn't stupid, apparently, just occasionally careless. It was possible I'd never know the truth. I might never find out. In a way, I hope I wouldn't. Kathy peered at me as we sat on the couch after the walk. Are you alright? What do you mean? I don't know. You seem a bit flat. Today? Not just today. Recently. I evaded her eyes. Just work. I got a lot on my mind. Kathy nodded, a sympathetic squeeze of my hand. She was a good actress. I could almost believe she cared. How was rehearsals going? Better. Tony came up with some good ideas. We're going to work late next week to go over them. Right. I no longer believed a word she said. I analyzed every sentence the way I would with the patient. I was looking for subtext, reading between the lines for nonverbal cues, subtle inflection, evasion, omissions, lies. How is Tony? Fine, she shrugged as if to indicate she couldn't care less. I didn't believe that. She idolized Tony, her director, and was forever talking about him. At least she used to. She hadn't mentioned him quite so much recently. They talk about plays and acting and the theater, a world beyond my knowledge. I heard a lot about Tony, but only glimpsed him once, briefly, when I went to meet Kathy at the rehearsal. I thought it odd that Kathy didn't introduce us. He was married and his wife was an actress. I got the sense Kathy didn't like her much. Perhaps his wife was jealous of their relationship, as I was. I suggested the four of us go out for dinner, but Kathy hadn't been particularly keen on the idea. Sometimes I wondered if she was trying to keep us apart. I watched Kathy open her laptop. She angled the screen away from me as she typed. I could hear her fingers tapping. Who was she writing to? Tony? What are you doing? I yawned. Just emailing my cousin. She's in Sydney now. Is she? Send her my love. I will. Kathy typed for a moment longer, then stopped typing and put down the laptop. I'm going to have a bath. I nodded. Okay. She gave me an amused look. Cheer up, darling. Are you sure you're okay? I smiled and nodded. She stood up and walked out. I waited until I heard the bathroom door close and the sound of running water. I slid over to where she had been seated. I reached for her laptop. My fingers were trembling as I opened it. I reopened her browser and went to her email login, but she logged out. I pushed away the laptop with disgust. This must stop, I thought. This way madness lies. Or was I mad already? I was getting into bed, pulling back the covers when Kathy walked into the bedroom brushing her teeth. I forgot to tell you, Nicole is back in London next week. Nicole? You remember Nicole. We went to her going away party. Oh yeah, I thought she moved to New York. She did, and now she's back. A pause. She wants me to meet her on Thursday night after rehearsal. I don't know what aroused my suspicion. Was it the way Kathy was looking in my direction but not making eye contact? I sensed she was lying. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. She disappeared from the door. I could hear her in the bathroom spitting out the toothpaste and rinsing her mouth. Perhaps there was nothing to it. Perhaps it was entirely innocent and Kathy was going to meet Nicole on Thursday. Perhaps. Only one way to find out. Chapter 19. There was no queue outside Alicia's gallery this time, as there had been that day 6 years ago when I had gone to see the Elysius. A different artist was hanging in the window now, and despite his possible talent, he lacked Alicia's notoriety and subsequent ability to draw in the crowds. As I entered the gallery, I shivered. It was even colder in here than on the street. There was something chilly about the atmosphere as well as the temperature. It smelled of exposed steel beams and bare concrete floors. It was soulless, I thought, empty. The gallerist was sitting behind his desk. He stood up as I approached. Jean Felix Martin was in his early 40s, a handsome man with black eyes and hair, and a tight t-shirt with a red skull on it. I told him who I was and why I had come. To my surprise, he seemed perfectly happy to talk about Alicia. He spoke with an accent. I asked if he was French. Originally from Paris, but I've been here since I was a student. Oh, 20 years at least. I think of myself more as British these days. He smiled and gestured to a back room. Come in, we can have a coffee. Thanks. Jean Felix led me into an office that was essentially a storeroom, crowded with stacks of paintings. How is Alicia? He asked, using a complicated-looking coffee machine. She not talking? I shook my head. No. He nodded and sighed. So sad. Won't you sit down? What do you want to know? I'll do my best to answer truthfully. Jean Felix gave me a wary smile, tinged with curiosity. Although I'm not entirely sure why you come to me. You and Alicia were close, weren't you, apart from your professional relationship? Who told you that? Gabriel's brother, Max Berenson. He suggested I talk to you. Jean Felix rolled his eyes. Oh, so you saw Max, did you? What a bore. He said it with such contempt I couldn't help laughing. You know Max Berenson? Well enough. Better than I like. He handed me a small cup of coffee. Alicia and I were close, very close. We knew each other for years, long before she met Gabriel. I didn't realize that. Oh yes, we were at art school together, and after we graduated, we painted together. You mean you collaborated? Well, not really, Jean Felix laughed. I mean, we painted walls together, as house painters. I smiled. Oh, I see. It turned out I was better at painting walls than paintings, so I gave up about the same time as Alicia's art started to really take off. And when I started running this place, it made sense for me to show Alicia's work. It was a very natural, organic process. Yes, it sounds like it. And what about Gabriel? What about him? I sensed a prickliness here, a defensive reaction that told me this was an avenue worth exploring. Well, I wonder how he fit into this dynamic. Presumably, you knew him quite well? Not really. No. Jean Felix hesitated a second. Gabriel didn't take time to know me. He was very caught up in himself. Sounds like you didn't like him. I don't think he liked me. In fact, I know he didn't. Why was that? I have no idea. Do you think perhaps he was jealous of your relationship with Alicia? Jean Felix sipped his coffee and nodded. Yes, possibly. He saw you as a threat, perhaps? You tell me. Sounds like you have all the answers. I took the hint. I didn't push it any further. Instead, I tried a different approach. You saw Alicia a few days before the murder, I believe? Yes, I went to the house to see her. Can you tell me a little about that? Oh, she had an exhibition coming up and she was behind with her work. She was rightfully concerned. You haven't seen any of the new work? No, she'd been putting me off for ages. I thought I'd better check on her. I expect she'd be in the studio at the end of the garden, but she wasn't. No, I found her in the house. How did you get in? Jean Felix looked surprised by the question. What? I could tell he was making some quick mental evaluation. Then he nodded. Oh, I see what you mean. Well, there was a gate that led from the street to the back garden. It was usually unlocked, and from the garden I went into the kitchen through the back door, which was also unlocked. He smiled. You know, you sound more like a detective than a psychiatrist. I'm a psychotherapist. Is there a difference? I'm just trying to understand Alicia's mental state. How did you experience her mood? Jean Felix shrugged. She seemed fine, a little stressed about work. Is that all? She didn't look like she was going to shoot her husband in a few days. That's what you mean. She seemed fine. He drank his coffee and hesitated as a thought struck him. Would you like to see some of her paintings? Without waiting for a reply, Jean Felix got up and walked to the door, beckoning me to follow. Come on. Chapter 20. I followed Jean Felix into a storage room. He went to a large case, pulled out a hinged rack, and lifted out 3 paintings wrapped in blankets. He propped them up. He carefully unwrapped each one, and then he stood back and presented the first one to me with a flourish. Voila! I looked at it. The painting had the same photorealistic quality as the rest of Alicia's work. It represented the car accident that killed her mother. A woman's body was sitting in the wreck, slumped at the wheel. She was bloody and obviously dead. Her spirit, her soul, was rising from the corpse, like a large bird with yellow wings soaring to the heavens. Isn't it glorious? Jean Felix gazed at it, all those yellows and reds and greens. I can quite get lost in it. It's joyous. Joyous wasn't the word I would have chosen. Unsettling, perhaps. I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I moved on to the next picture, a painting of Jesus on the cross. Or was it? It's Gabriel, Jean Felix said. It's a good likeness. It was Gabriel, but Gabriel portrayed as Jesus. Crucified, hanging from the cross, blood trickling from his wounds, a crown of thorns on his head. His eyes were not downcast but staring out, unblinking, tortured, unashamedly reproachful. They seemed to burn right through me. I peered at the picture more closely, at the incarnate item strapped to Gabriel's torso. A rifle. That's the gun that killed him? Jean Felix nodded. Yes, it belonged to him, I think. And this was painted before his murder? A month or so before. It shows you what was on Alicia's mind, doesn't it? Jean Felix moved on to the third picture. It was a larger canvas than the others. This one's the best. Then back to get a better view. Send back to get a better look. I did as he said and took a few paces back. Then I turned and looked. The moment I saw the painting, I let out an involuntary laugh. The subject was Alicia's aunt, Linda Rose. It was obvious why she had been so upset about it. Linda was nude, reclining on a tiny bed. The bed was buckling under her weight. She was enormously, monstrously fat. An explosion of flesh spilling over the bed and hitting the floor and spreading across the room, rippling and folding like waves of gray custard. Jesus, that's cruel. I think it's quite lovely. Jean Felix looked at me with interest. You know Linda? Yes, I went to visit her. I see, he smiled. You have been doing your homework. I never met Linda. Alicia hated her, you know. Yes, I stared at the painting. Yes, I can see that. Jean Felix began carefully wrapping up the pictures again. And the calypsis? I said, can I see it? Of course, follow me. Jean Felix led me along the narrow passage to the end of the gallery. There the calypsis accompanied a wall to itself. It was just as beautiful and mysterious as I remember it. Alicia naked in the studio, in front of a blank canvas, painting with a blood-red paintbrush. I studied Alicia's expression. Again, it defied interpretation. I frowned. She's impossible to read. That's the point. It is a refusal to comment. It's a painting about silence. I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Well, at the heart of all art lies a mystery. Alicia's silence is her secret, her mystery in the religious sense. That's why she named it Alcisis. Have you read it by Michaelides? He gave me a curious look. Read it, then you'll understand. I nodded, and then I noticed something in the painting I hadn't before. I leaned forward to look closely. A bowl of fruit sat on the table in the background of the picture. A collection of apples and pears. On the red apples were some small white blobs, slithering white blobs creeping in and around the fruit. I pointed at them. Are they maggots? Jean Felix nodded. Yes. Fascinating. I wonder what that means. It's wonderful. A masterpiece. It really is, Jean Felix sighed, and glanced at me across the portrait. He lowered his voice as if Alicia were able to hear us. It's a shame you didn't know her then. She was the most interesting person I ever met. Most people aren't alive, you know. Not really. Sleepwalking their way through life. But Alicia was so intensely alive. It was hard to take your eyes off her. Jean Felix turned his head back to the painting and gazed at Alicia's naked body. So beautiful. I looked back at Alicia's body, but where Jean Felix saw beauty, I saw only pain. I saw self-inflicted wounds and scars of self-harm. Did she ever talk about her suicide attempt? I was fishing, but Jean Felix took the bait. Oh, you know about that? Oh, yes, of course. After her father died, she went to pieces, Jean Felix nodded. The truth is, Alicia was hugely fucked up. Not as an artist, but as a person, she was extremely vulnerable. When her father hanged himself, it was too much. She couldn't cope it. She must have loved him a great deal. Jean Felix gave a kind of strangled laugh. He looked at me as if I were mad. What are you talking about? What do you mean? Alicia didn't love him. She hated her father. She despised him. I was taken aback by this. Alicia told you that? Of course she did. She hated him ever since she was a kid, ever since her mother died. But then why try to commit suicide after his death? If it wasn't grief, what was it? Jean Felix shrugged. Guilt, perhaps? Who knows? There was something he wasn't telling me, I thought. Something didn't fit. Something was wrong. His phone rang. Excuse me. He turned away from me to answer it. A woman's voice was on the other end. They talked for a moment, arranging a time to meet. I'll call you back, baby, he said, and hung up. Jean Felix turned back to me. Sorry about that. That's alright. Your girlfriend? He smiled. Just a friend. I have a lot of friends. I'll bet you do, I thought. I felt a flicker of dislike. I wasn't sure why. As he showed me out, I asked a final question. Just one more thing. Did Alicia ever mention a doctor to you? A doctor? Apparently she saw a doctor around the time of her suicide attempt. I'm trying to locate him. Jean Felix frowned. Possibly. There was someone. Can you remember his name? He thought for a second and shook his head. I'm sorry, no, I honestly can't. Well, if it comes to you, perhaps you can let me know? Sure, but I doubt it. He glanced at me and hesitated. You want some advice? I'll welcome some. If you really want to get Alicia to talk, give her some paint and brushes. Let her paint. That's the only way she'll talk to you, through her art. That's an interesting idea. You've been very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Call me Jean Felix, and when you see Alicia, tell her I love her. He smiled, and again I felt a slight repulsion. I found something about Jean Felix hard to stomach. I could tell he had been generally close to Alicia. They had known each other a long time, and he was obviously attracted to her. Was he in love with her? I wasn't so sure. I thought of Jean Felix's face when he was looking at the Augustus. Yes, love was in his eyes, but love for the painting, not necessarily the painter. Jean Felix converted the art, otherwise he would have visited Alicia at the Grove. He would have stuck by her. I knew that for a fact. A man never abandoned a woman like that, not if he loves her.